Welcome to Tip Off today. David Locke along with you as we get ready on this. What day is it? What day is it? It's time for the first home Jazz game of the year day. It's October 12th, Monday, 8:42 in the morning as I record this. You get to listen to it or watch it whenever, however, and wherever you wish. I am always trying to make things better, always without a staff to actually, we don't, we're not like, I don't got like five guys who are putting together production on this and things like that. So sometimes it's a little messy. I agree. I have moved us back over to YouTube. What it means right now is that I'm not doing it per se live. I don't think that matters. That's kind of why I have done this. Is I don't think it actually matters if I'm live. And I don't think many people are watching it live. You get it as a podcast. You get it as a YouTube. If it's on YouTube, you can subscribe to it at DLock09. There are some functionality things I don't have here that I may have to try to figure out if I want to show you video or things like that. It's going to take me a little work to figure that out. So that's the plan here. So if you want to subscribe to the DLock09 YouTube channel, that'll be good. That'll be good because that'll get you all this stuff. And bring it right to your YouTube. YouTube's done a great job mobily recently, so you should be able to watch it on your mobile better. Hopefully that's the right move. Let me know. And then there are some live. If we go live, we probably have to go back to live stream. But this seems like it's the right thing to do. So that's the plan. Jazz are home tonight. It is also the anniversary of the first ever Utah Jazz game. The Utah Jazz played their first ever regular season game on this day in Portland and lost to the Blazers. Took us a little while to get a win. That'll come here in a little bit. But I want to share, this is self-serving. We are putting together two aspects of our broadcast this year that I'm really proud of, and I want to just brag, frankly. One is that I've finished this weekend. I went through basically every interview I've ever done with any of our players. For Gordon and Derek, that's over the last 5 years. For Trey, it's over the last 3, etc. Edited those sound bites that are still relevant. And throughout broadcast, we'll be able to drop those in about our players, let you get to know them a little better, give them insight on what they're thinking, what their experiences are, things like that. So very, very excited about that. It was quite a project. I think it turned out to be 1,100 sound bites, which we certainly won't get all of them in during the season. The second one is we are going to run a feature this year on the broadcast, This Day in Jazz History. And I'm hoping to get in touch with Ricky Green and Thurl and Mark Eaton and Daryl Griffith and Adrian Dantley and maybe Stockton and Malone and Dave Fredman and all sorts of longtime Jazz people, so that each day that something's relevant in Jazz history that we play, we'll go back to it, get a quick memory of it. That'll be on the Jazz broadcast this year. So very excited to have that as part of our program. And then for those of you, whenever you miss a Jazz game this year, Jazz Game Rewind will be up and running for you, and I'll put it on the Locked On Jazz podcast feed this year. That'll be done by any of our 6 broadcast assistants this year. So excited about all those things. That I just wasted 2 minutes of your time because I worked so hard on it this weekend that I wanted to talk about it. How's that? All right, let's get to it. We have been doing a really fun feature, and I forgot the other day. I felt terrible. I was so rushed Friday, and things just aren't still working quite right on the road. That my computer has just never quite gotten the concept of doing both video and audio at the same time, so that's been disappointing. I'll have to try to see what we can do on that. But with that said, let us time to go give you another pin across the world. You can email me at dlock09@gmail.com and tell me where you are in your story. Hi, David. I've been an audio listener since your very first episode and have by myself been a podcaster since late 2005. Kind of awesome. I'm a TV director in Los Angeles. Fairly tough place for a Jazz fan to live, but hopefully I get to see you and the team on Kobe's potentially final game this season, unless his body tells him the final game is earlier. Also on January 10th in the Clipper dates. It depends on when I am sent on location to film, but those are the biggest circles on my calendar. Thanks for putting in the work for us year in and year out. That is from Jonathan London, and put Jazz pin in Los Angeles, which is super sweet. Anytime we do that. Jonathan, thanks very much. So email me at dlock09@gmail.com. Tell me your little story and where you watch tip-off from. All right, let's get to the NBA 5. This is going to be somewhat of an intellectual show today. I meant to open up with that and tell you about that. So I hope you're ready to think today. Guys who look great right now in preseason, and I have no idea what value that has. I have absolutely no value. Even when I'm watching and calling these games, I can't tell you what I want to take from these games. But so far, Kyle Lowry in Toronto looks fabulous. Carmelo, frankly, looks really good in New York. And Kobe looks good. And really, how can we go on with tip-off without mentioning tip-off favorite Devin Marble, who had 21 for Orlando last night? For those of you who are longtime tip-off listeners, there's a joke about Devin Marble from years past. For those of you who are not, just let it fly. No need to let you know about it. A few other news notes for you. Bulls have shot 33 three-pointers a game so far this year. That's under Hoiberg. That's 10 more than they did against Tebow, so we'll see whether that's real. James Harden bruised his knee yesterday for Houston, so he's out for the time being. And then Chris two interesting moves starting lineup-wise. It sounds like Washington is going to start Chris Humphries over Nene, and Minnesota's going to start Zach LaVine at the 2 over Kevin Martin. They're also going to start Kevin Garnett. I'm not sure he can play anymore, but he owns part of the team at this point, so he gets to start. All right, those are your NBA 5 notes. This is the intellectual part of the show today. I want to walk you through, it was a really interesting piece on nylon calculus this weekend. And Seth and the guys there just do great work. And all training camp long, there's been this discussion of whether the Jazz trying to pick up pace and tempo. And frankly, I've harped on it as much as anyone. The Jazz used more possessions than anyone in the NBA in the final 7 seconds of the shot clock last year. And they're not particularly, they were actually, I think, above league average, but not great. But the more I watch and the more I wonder, are the Jazz really doing the right thing in increasing tempo? And I think they are, but let's walk through the concept here. And really, if you listen to Quinn closely, Quinn talks about having a thrust offensively. He does not talk about increasing pace. And he talks about wanting to get the ball up forward and get action started earlier. And Dennis Lindsay talks about how the Jazz often have almost like a running team in football, time of possession advantage, where they're going to force the other team to play defense for a longer period of time and make them cycle through the possession with lots of actions, lots of passes, and really force them to defend for an extended period of time, which is going to take away their ability to run. Okay, so that's the concept. Now, what nylon calculus did is they went and tried to create a transition percentage number. And what they did is they took the amount of defensive rebounds and steals. So he called those transition opportunities, right? Under those, it can't be turnovers because turnovers can be a dead ball. It's off defensive rebounds, and that is a little sketchy because if you get a free throw, defensive rebounds, not really a transition opportunity. But those are few, and frankly, missed second free throws. If you make 70% of your free throws, in theory, you take 25 of them a game. There's only 12 that are second free throws, even a little less, about 11, and so there's only about 3 of those a game. So it's not that big a deal. But so they're taking transition as defensive rebounds and steals, and then taking the synergy numbers of how often your possessions are transition possessions, and figuring out what percentage of transition, of opportunities you actually use in early as transition opportunities, right? So last year, the Jazz, in 30% of the opportunities that they had to have a transition possession, did they actually take a shot in the realm that's classified as early offense, early transition. 30%. It was the 6th lowest rate in the NBA. Okay? However, they were great at it. They were the 4th best in the NBA when they used transition. 3rd best effective field goal percentage in the NBA. That's really where we shot a lot of our threes, at 1.16 points per possession. Sorry, my phone's ringing. It's Britton Johnson. He's doing the game with me today. So let me just text him right back and tell him I will call him. So sixth fewest possessions, but when we used him, we were the fourth best. Okay, so I actually, that I like. That's good decision making. Got them out there. When we had the opportunity, we took it. When we didn't, we pulled it back, and we played our game. That sounds pretty good to me. Defensively, interestingly, we were middle of the pack at stopping transition opportunities. We actually weren't very good at defending them either. Surprising. It means when we get you in the half court, though, we're nails. And Dennis Lindsay has commented on this, that their analytics show that when we get you, the Jazz get you into the back end of a possession, we're nails. We'll kill you. Okay? So it's interesting. So those are the first two things we're talking about here. First is the Jazz, truthfully, very rarely went out and got out, sixth fewest opportunities, and then but when they did it well. All right. So, I mean, the easy answer is, well, we should do it more because we did it well. Yeah, well, you can try to do it more, but you probably drop your efficiency a little bit. And defensively, interesting that we were in the middle of the pack, that really what we were great at was half-court defense. Now, what I thought was interesting is, if you go back to this, what's the premise here? Let's go back to the premise of why are you trying to get early possession? Because the best way, I'm taking this right from, it was said very well by Seth in Nylon Calculus's piece. The best way to beat a team with a quality defensive scheme is to avoid the quality defensive scheme. Actually, the point of the Jazz. We're a good defensive scheme. Quinn really does a hell of a job with it. And if we get you into that half court, you're dead. So what do? You got to run and you got to score early against us. Getting as much offense as possible, writes in Nylon Calculus, in situations where those well-dialed defensive principles don't have a chance to kick in, is the essence of what you're trying to do here. Well, there's two ways to do that. One is transition, what we're talking about. What's the other? What's the other method to score when the defense is not established? Offensive rebounding. And we were the number one offensive rebounding team in the NBA last year. So the concern that I have is if we're trying to push offensively in transition and increase our percentage of possessions that we do in transition opportunities, are we also decreasing our number one strength, which is offensive rebounding? Now, the question then has to be, which I don't have the answer to, is our offensive rebounding percentage lower in transition than it is in the half court? Okay, that's the next step. I told you there's thinking to be done today. I had to get another sip of coffee to get things going. All right, so one axiom is that we push transition, get better opportunities. We were very good at it last year. We were the fourth best in the NBA. Our effective field goal percentage was the third best. We 1.16 points per transition possession. Second one is, whoa, wait a sec. If we get set in the half court and get our offensive rebounders in there, we're the number one offensive rebounding team in the league. So now let's really get into how many possessions we're talking about here. Okay? How many possessions are we really talking about? And what's interesting that they do find on Nylon Calculus was, at least last year, there's a decent correlation between offensive and defensive transition, in that a faster a team played offensively, the more they tended to give up defensively. However, there's no correlation between having a good speed index, which is your offensive transition percentage minus your defensive transition percentage, to winning. None. Right? So that's really interesting to me, because that's all I want to correlate. That's where this whole turnover thing that we're worried about, and 10 turnovers in the second quarter, definitely is too many. I don't think there's any question to that. You can't have 10 turnovers in a quarter. It's 40 for a game. But so that's excessive. But overall, I'm not as worried about this turnover thing everyone else is talking about with the Jazz right now, because turnovers don't correlate to winning. So here's, for example, the team speed index. If you look at them, the teams that had, Utah was a minus 6%. So in other words, teams had more transition opportunities at 6% of the time than we did. But Phoenix was a plus 10, and they had a losing record. And Philadelphia was a plus 8, and they had a losing record. And Oklahoma City was a plus 6, and they were 500. And Milwaukee was a plus 9, and they were below 500. And New Orleans was minus 7, and they were above 500. And Toronto was a -6 and they were above 500. And San Antonio was a -5 and they're above 500. And Sacramento was a -4 and they were below 500. Charlotte was a -6% and they're below 500. Boston was a +8 and they're above. There's no correlation here between speed index and winning. Okay? I think that's important to know. So now let's dig into how many possessions are we really talking about? So the Jazz ran on 36%, or excuse me, on 30% of their transition opportunities did they use a possession early in the offense, which was low. The high was 51% by Houston, 49% by Phoenix, and middle of the pack is 36%. But that's only in defensive rebounds and steals. So let's go look at the whole game. In reality, the league average is transition possessions are 13.5% of all transition possessions in the game. So if league average is about 92 possessions, we're talking about 11 a game, 11 or 12 a game. If it's 100 possessions, we're talking 13, 14 possessions a game. Not a lot, right? So really, we're pushing this big emphasis, 13, 14 possessions a game. Jazz were at 11.6% of their possessions last year were in transition. And as we talked about, they're good at it. The average was 13.5. The Houston's the highest at 19, Golden State at 18, Phoenix at 18. The lowest was Charlotte, and the Knicks at 10%. Okay, so that's 13. League average is 13, 14 possessions a game. Jazz were at 11 or 12. Okay, so 2 percentage points below. How about offensive rebounds? Well, the Jazz were the number 2 team in the NBA at percentage of possessions they used on a putback by synergy. 7%. Detroit was number 1 at 8. Hawks and Spurs are consciously low. They don't believe in offensive rebound at 4%. I think they're wrong, by the way. But we'll elaborate on this in a second. The league average is 6%. Okay? So the Jazz, who were the number 1 team in the league in points per possession on putbacks, 1.19 points per putback. Number 1 in the league. We scored 61% of the time we got an offensive rebound last year. So 61% of the time we get an offensive rebound, we put it back up at 1.17. It's only league average 6% of possessions, only 5 or 6 a game that you actually get a real putback. We're getting it 1 extra time, maybe 1.5 extra times at 1.19 points per possession. We're 2 possessions behind in transition. Is it worth picking up the tempo, trying to get early opportunities, and having less chances to use what we're the best in the league at, which is offensive rebounding? It's a really interesting philosophical discussion. There's some pieces of this information I don't have. What is our rebounding rate in transition in contrast to our rebounding rate in the half court on the offensive side? That's an important data point I don't have. But I think this is interesting. There's no correlation at all between winning and having a good speed index. Playing faster than your opponent doesn't correlate to winning. Does it correlate to better offense? Not sure. Really not sure, because if we're getting, call it 100 possessions a game, 2 possessions less per game in transition, but we're getting a possession and a half more in offensive rebounding at a higher rate, it's close to a wash. It's an interesting mix. Now, I have presented these 2 things as being incongruent, diametrically opposed. That if you play fast, you don't offensive rebound. There could be a flaw in that. That I need to do deeper research on. I need to really look in and figure out whether or not that's true. Are high pace teams bad offensive rebounding teams? I'm not sure that's totally true. But I think for the purpose of this, which I'm not telling an NBA team what to do, but as a fan base discussing thoughts, I think it's a pretty good discussion. Right? I think it's a pretty good discussion. Let me look here while this is where it'd be nice if I had a video to share with you, because I'm actually just going to look this up while we're sitting here talking. And that is the advanced metrics. If we look last year at the highest pace of play teams, let me see if I can tell you where they ranked offensively in offensive rebounding. The highest pace of play teams, the Warriors were 21st in offensive rebounding. The Rockets were 7th. The Suns were 19th. The Nuggets were 9th. The Celtics were 16th. And the Thunder were 2nd. Okay? Doesn't seem to have. The slowest pace of play teams, the Jazz were the number 1 offensive rebounding team. The Heat were 26th. The Knicks were 18th. The Pelicans were 4th. The Grizzlies were 17th. And the Cavaliers were 6th. There doesn't seem 3 of the 6, worth noting, I think there's a little correlation here. 3 of the 6, 4 of the final 8, and 5 of the bottom 10 pace of play teams in the NBA were in the top 6 or 20% of offensive rebounding teams. So 1, 3, 4, 5, and 6. 5 of the top 10 or 5 of the top 6 offensive rebounding teams were in the bottom 10 of pace of play. The only exception was Oklahoma City. So there does seem to be some correlation here between slow pace and offensive rebounding. Okay? The reason the Jazz were average last year offensively is offensive rebounding. Okay? If you go to take it, there's 4 factors that go into your offensive rating. One is your effective field goal percentage. We are 15th in the NBA. The second is your turnover rate. We were 27th in the NBA. Your third is the rate you go to the free throw line. We were 7th. And offensive rebounding, we were 1st. Okay, that's how we became 15th in the league offensively last year. All right, let you chew on it. Let you decide what you want to chew on that. See what you think on that. The next tier of this conversation, by the way, is whether there are times in the game where you should be playing this tempo and not others, for a future discussion. Have a good one.